The second video in my Dwarven series is this Dwarven door. Totally modular, the side pillars come off, the miniatures on the top come off, where you can use those in separate scenarios, and the whole thing is battery powered, got some awesome runes sticking out. I'm going to show you how to do that this week on Tabletop Witchcraft. Hey there, and welcome back to Tabletop Witchcraft. This week is video 2 in my Dwarven series, and we're building this Dwarven door. And it's about as modular as you can get. A nice feature is that the side columns, or the pillars, are held on by magnets, so you can actually remove those and put those together and use those as a solid structure or other features in different games. And obviously the miniatures on the top are held on by magnets and come off as well. Another neat feature is that you can actually replace this orange lens behind these runes to any color you want, and if you'd like, the door even comes out. So, this video puts us one step closer to my epic build and collaboration with Paladin Woodworking. So, let's go grab some supplies and let's get crafting. So we're going to kick this video off by cutting out this main section of the Dwarven door, leaving the two side pillars attached to the stencil still. And then we'll trace this out and we'll make this cut on a piece of 2-inch XPS foam. Now, a cool little trick, you see I'm using a piece of scrap here and it's rounded around the whole piece, but I want to get a nice straight cut. So I'm using that framing square to give myself a straight edge along the side of the door. Then I can use that edge on the proxon to make a nice cut for the door itself. Then we can just use the stencil to get the proper width of the overall door and make that cut as well. Now you can make these cuts with that framing square and an alpha knife. You don't need the proxon, although it does help. And here you can see I'm using my hand to act as a guide to freehand cut the top piece of the door. Okay, so make this cut out here on the stencil, and we're going to cut out the frame for the door itself. The heat on the proxon is probably about a 2, maybe just over a 2 on the heat setting. And if you have it set up just right, you can guide that wire along that line and then pause for a second right at each corner and then let the proxon kind of catch up, and then you'll have some nice square cuts with the proxon. If you do it too hot, it's going to be really hard to control those cuts freehand. Now this was a really fun cut to make here. Essentially what we're doing is we got to cut the face of this door off so that we can insert our lights into the main section of the door. So this is sort of like a panel for the front of the door that we're cutting out. And with a cut like that, you really have to just go for it, have confidence in yourself, and make the cut. Now here I wanted the door to be inset from the frame, or the jamb, I guess. So I just cut about 1/4 inch off of each side of the door so that it now is set in on each side of the frame. Now I've got some Dwarven runes around the entire frame of the door, and I cut those out with an X-Acto, and I'll just use a marker here to mark all those out. And when you cut these out, I like to put a piece of foam underneath what I'm working on. That way I can make a nice straight clean cut all the way through the foam, and it doesn't sort of like blow out on the back side when you're working with it. And then using a wood sculpting tool, you want to be real delicate here to press out the runes. And it's about to get real frustrating here in just a few seconds. I don't want to watch. Yeah, it's gonna get painful. I literally froze when I did this, like for that long, just staring at it. But I wanted to show that because, we crafted this out of a solid block of foam There's no reason that if we screw up like this that we can't fix something like that as well. So to secure this, I just tapped a few holes into each side, put a little tacky glue on some toothpicks, and then to have an initial hold, a little bit of hot glue, and that will hold that in place, and then I can kind of keep working. It really didn't even set me back anything. And then once this was all painted up, you really couldn't even see that break at all. And to be honest, that's probably the strongest section of the entire door now anyway. Okay, now on the jamb, or again the frame itself, you want to mark out however you can. I don't know why, I used a little bit of pigment at first and it was a mess. And then I ended up using a marker to mark out some of the other runes. But you want to mark those out so you have an idea of where to cut out and remove the foam for the lighting. That way you don't have any dark spots behind the runes. And then if you score that out, it comes out real easy with that clay sculpting tool. And now you can just take this light and bend it, and with it on you can see where any dark spots are. I'll have links to all the items I've used in this video in my Amazon links in the description below if you want to pick any of those items up. Items like the lights here and all the tools that I'm using. Now this technique, I just put a little bit of blue paint on the back of the that cover there and touched it to the other side of the frame. And that's going to allow me to see where I need to put my holes so that they line up for my magnets. And a cool little tip, if you get some paint and you let it dry and then you burn the hole out where the paint is, it's more of a controlled burn in the foam, so it doesn't go as out of control if you just put a hole in it without the paint. So it kind of just like slows the burn down a little bit. Now these are some smaller magnets than I typically use. You might have seen me use these magnets if you've seen my LED torch video. So right there, we are just cutting out the gem for the top of the door. And then using that same stencil, we'll cut out the middle. And now we're just adding some facets on this gem, cutting it at an angle. And then we'll remove the centerpiece, because we want that gem to light up as well. Alright, then just texture the whole piece with some foam. And then we'll Mod Podge the whole thing. Alright, now we're using the stencil to mark out some of the details on the door. And I used the X-Acto knife here to actually just literally cut right into the foam, because I'm going to need to make those cuts anyway so that they really stand out with my pen. And I didn't bother cutting all the way through because some of that's going to be covered up by some of the door design itself. Now I'm inserting some magnets into the top of the door so that we can remove it and snap it into place. Pay no attention to the wood design. As you can see right here, I didn't like it, and I just sliced it right off on the Proxxon. Another nice little feature to, if you ever mess up, you can kind of make corrections like that with the ability, to cut that thin in the foam. Okay, so now we're going to work on the design on the door itself. This is some dollar store foam core that I'm using. And using the stencil, we'll just trace this out, cut it out with an X-Acto. And now for the base of the anvil, the center, and then the top of the flame, we're gonna raise those up from the main design with another piece of foam. And I'm just cutting a little bit of an angle to those. That way it looks a lot nicer than just square pieces on that section itself. And then just simply hot glue them right in place. Okay, a really cool way to make pillars out of a solid block of foam. Again, if you have a Proxxon, that's just a solid block right there. Set your wire maybe 1/8 of an inch or so in from your high fence. Get the heat, again, maybe about a little over 2.5, somewhere in there. And then, like so, you can stop briefly right there, and you'll have a nice square edge on the column. Now these pieces right here you've seen on the Dwarven pillar. If you've seen that video, if you haven't, I'll put a link up above. I'm going to pretty much follow the same paint scheme and pattern in this video as well. And we're just going to inset those into the base of the column like that. And the nice thing about having these the same as the pillar is those are actually pieces from the pillar that I had left over laying around, so I didn't even have to cut those. Now around the top of the door, very simple, I'm just putting some almost like strapping over the whole door. 2 straps, and I'm going to do some embellishments here with some rhinestones. And these are the largest rhinestones that come in the pack. And I like to just put a tiny little dab of super glue, because too much will actually melt the foam. And then I place the rhinestone right on top of that. Then once you Mod Podge and paint this, they're locked in place. They're not going anywhere forever. Now once that's done, we're ready to start moving on to hiding this battery pack for the door itself. So just trace that out on the side of the door, and then we're going to cut it out, the perimeter of it, with this hot wire knife. And then we'll remove the entire inside of this for the battery pack with a clay sculpting tool. And it comes out in pretty big chunks. You just want to work on something solid so you don't accidentally go through the side of the door and put a hole in it. Now again, earlier I put a link to the pillars, and just follow that same paint scheme. This is a dark gray mixed with some black to make it really dark. And now here, this is kind of important, and I'm not really showing it that well in the video, but I'm doing a silver and a bronze coating for this door. And the lines that delineate between the bronze and the copper, you really want to get a lot of silver in those. That way it's painted silver in those lines, and we'll touch it up with the copper after. And now I'm using some Vallejo paints because I really wanted this spark off the anvil to really shine. So I'm going with some really decent bright colors here. You must have heard, if you've been following my channel, it's one of my favorite paints to use, this dark aluminum by Vallejo. And I'm just dry brushing the black anvil, and it gives it a really cool metallic look to it. This anvil I thought came out really nice. And we're just going to do this up in some antique copper. And then give this a pretty decent black wash. And we're going to do a really cool effect on the door here in just a minute. Now before the black wash dries completely, I like to take a Q-tip and clean, not the whole piece, just the center. Maybe where the door slides open and closed, leaving it darker and a little bit grimier towards the edges. Alright, now we got a bunch of hinges. I painted these up the same way I did the anvil. Solid black with a dry brush of that dark aluminum. Okay, now that this is dry, I wanted to bring up the center just a little bit more, brighten it up a little bit more. So again, I'm not even using a brush, just a Q-tip, just to smear a little bit and feather out some of the brighter natural steel color on the door. And now I'm using obviously a solid bronze color. It's a little bit brighter than that antique copper to bring that up as well. So obviously the whole door was black washed as well, and then I did a light dry brush of a lighter gray over all the stonework. And then we just glue all those pieces on. Now these tokens, these are awesome. These are really heavy. They're Dwarven coins. I got them online. This company has barbarian coins, elven coins, magic coins. Really cool. I ended up buying some other coins as well when I picked these up. But I thought these would make really nice embellishments on the door itself. And what's nice about having everything connected with magnets is these side columns or pillars on this door, these can be used all by themselves. I mean, you can put them together and make a bigger, maybe statue in the center of a town out of them. You can use them individually. You know, these magnets are only costing about 13 cents a piece. So the amount of time they're going to save and the more use you're going to get out of these pieces by just slapping a couple of magnets in there, to me, it's well worth it. Now this lens, again, you've seen me use this in the Dwarven pillars. Same deal, rough it up on both sides. You're going to get a better light kind of disbursement by having that roughed up than just putting it in naturally. And I don't glue this in, I'm just laying this right in place. That way if I ever want to change the color on it, I can do so very quickly. Alright, now again, to get a little bit more use out of the tops of the pillars that I'm going to put on here in just a minute, we're going to hold the little Dwarven minis that I painted up right in place with these magnets. Now this is a Reaper miniature that I'm using, and I just thought that his stance looked pretty cool. And I used some green stuff on the base, and I put some more runes around the base as well. And then a little bit of primer, some bronze paint. I absolutely love the way these colors work together. Use some Vallejo bronze, you hit it up with a Nuln oil, and then once that dries, you do a dry brush of polished gold over the top, and it comes out amazing. Absolutely amazing. I love doing this technique. Alright, so we've got a bunch of Dwarven pillars. We got a really cool Dwarven door. And next week's video is a very classic Dwarven set piece that I'm pumped to put out. And it's packed with a bunch of little details, and we're even going to break out that green stuff. If you think you know what it is, leave a comment below. And while you're down there, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. And head on over to Patreon. It's support over there that will really help this channel out. I've got a lot of really cool things planned in the future, and your support will go a long way. Alright, until next time, I'll see you around.